I should just start all of these off by giving some brief description of what net neutrality is, why it's so important, why it's under attack, how it's under attack, what will happen if it is destroyed, and just four warnings on what can be done to address it. But as I was sitting here and thinking in my mind about how there are people I'm actively seeing, whether it be online in real life, that I know are frequent users of the World Wide Web and live in the US and are most definitely going to be taken aback when come December 13th they turn on the computer and see ads all over the place and have websites loading slower than possible. Um, it really made me think and pose the question in my mind, is it a waste of time and effort to try and educate people who aren't necessarily informed of this topic? Yeah, and Reluctant Dragon is bringing me back to my memories of yesterday. People stick their fingers in their ear and go, no, 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 no. They do. Um, but I really want to ask that because if you'll notice, not much has changed in the way of who's actually coming over here. You're seeing the same five, six, seven people who I'm glad are paying attention to this and have, even if you don't come in the stream, it's still, if you're going somewhere else, at the very least, that's fine as well. You're paying attention to this topic. Um, but I've tried to reach out to others. And there's this almost, they do this thing where they acknowledge, oh, yeah, that sucks. I can sign a petition. Oh, man, maybe, what do you mean maybe? Sign it. And I've seen them waste time on other things. They'll go and sit back and turn on some game and play that for several hours. You can spend several hours playing that game, but you can't spend, 10 minutes signing various petitions across the web. That's where there's a level of ridiculousness to this whole debate in my mind of whether or not that idea of it being a waste of time to try reaching out is confirmed. Because it really seems as though we're just living in an era where people are encouraged to know just the bare minimum of things and not bother to learn something unless they have to do some report or it's required for some assignments. And I'm like that in a couple of ways. There are things I want to learn, and there are things I'm not necessarily that big on learning. But I recognize it as either an obstacle to be overcome or potentially benefiting me. I don't know anyone who's ever been hurt by knowing more things. That never occurred to me. I have a hard time understanding it, but I want people to think about this. How many of you, and I know that there's a wide variety of individuals who have had this happen, knew virtually nothing about, let's say, an American war or a war that the U.S. participated in prior to having to do some kind of assignment on it? When I was in what grade was that? It was the latter part of middle school. That was the first time there was any discussion or actual talking about World War II. Prior to that, I couldn't tell you what president we had during that time, what world leaders, the Axis or the Allies, the things starting with the invasion of Poland, or just anything. Okay, well, I'm not disagreeing with that Reluctant Dragon. The point I'm making is that there are things we don't feel a need to try and get out and understand unless we're in some situation where it's almost a requirement. And that's a horrible factoid of life where people are only encouraged to be more than the bare minimum if it needs to or it ascertains to their way of living. There are plenty of people who in 30 or 40 years are going to be on Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security. They're not going to know who, or Medicare and Medicaid, they're not going to know who made that. They're not going to be able to tell you about Johnson or, getting that through law, or how Truman was the first person who got a car. They won't be able to discuss any of that. And it's not because they're dumb. It's not because they're stupid. It's because they don't care enough to go out and actively try to understand something. Remember, this is the internet era, Reluctant Dragon. You're the only one going back and forth with me here. This is the internet era where people can just go and no, To answer Mr. Ashley's question, I identify with neither party. Um, yeah, Reluctant Dragon. I'm talking about OBJ. He's the one who made Medicare and Medicaid, as well as food stamps and the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act and Consumer Protection Agency, um, environmental laws as well. But anyway, um, it's problematic to me that this, yeah, he signed so much landmark legislation. If Trump had any of his abilities, they would have repealed Obamacare by now and probably had another health proposal in there. We would be in a completely different world if he was able to negotiate with Congress the way OBJ was able to. But to the main point of what I was saying, you can't have a society that is the way it is currently, where there's a very large portion of people. I like to believe it's sizable, but it's not. I hope it's not a majority. I don't know for sure or not. That are only going to learn something if it's required. I don't know what you mean by agree with the FCC. I don't agree with the choice to repeal net neutrality. So I don't know what that question. You have to phrase that differently. But going alongside the idea of this is something that is major that needs to be learned, because we have to remember 2 years ago, no one would be talking about this because it wasn't under attack. So even if it gets pushed back, I don't know who you're speaking to, Reluctant Dragon. But even if it gets pushed back to, let's say, 3 years from now, we're just gonna go back to talking about everything else, and then 2 or 3 weeks before it happens, start posting a bunch of videos. Oh, it's under attack again. It's under attack again. It's under attack again. No, I'm not either of those things. I don't use any of that or do any of that or do not identify as any of that. To answer your question, to all those questions, there's a no printed at the end of them, signed in big bold letters, capital NO. And it's not necessarily to say that I am opposed to that type of behavior, but it's not me. But going alongside the lines of individuals who, for example, don't think this is a big deal. It makes sense because, and this goes back to the common theme of why people don't learn things unless they have to. On a day-to-day basis, knowing this doesn't impact your life. You're still going to have to go to work. You're still going to have to go to school. You're still going to have to pay taxes and get gas and have things that continue the way they are regardless of if this is in your bank of knowledge. So when you look at it that way, it does make sense to not know these things, to not think of these things, and to not be bothered by trying to get to know these things. Unfortunately, the only way a lot of people who are currently either alive now or going to be born in the next 20, 40, 60 years are going to learn about net neutrality and how it almost got stomped in 2017 is going to be when they have to do some report on how the Constitution had blind spots, which included freedom of speech on the internet. That's the only way they're going to learn this. Their parents won't tell them this. Their grandparents won't tell them this. And it's not because the parents or grandparents were dumb or unaware. They just don't see the point in trying to put it out there. A different way of thinking with new information. I like facts, period. Yeah, I'm also big on facts. But the crux of my argument is that we're going to move to an era where people just learn things to get something out of it that is not necessarily just the acquirement of information or the acquiring of information. As I stated before, I didn't learn anything political until one day just sitting down and going and reading about it out of curiosity. Will not just benefit them, but also it's necessity. They have to learn it to get something done. If I told you write a school paper about, I don't know, Calvin Coolidge, a lot of people go, who? And they'll have to go look the name up and go on, I guess, whitehouse.com or some other credible site or go look up some books and then start learning about them. And they're only going to take that initiative after I told them, hey, learn about this because you're going to need this for this paper. Yeah, the Roaring 20s, when he served. as the what 30 yeah, the 30th president of the United States. Um, but you get the idea that unless you were there, the only reason you're going to want to learn about any of this stuff is if someone requires you. And the sad thing is, a lot of people will know off name alone who that person is. So, for example, you skip forward 60 years from now, people are going to remember who Obama was, but are they going to remember, the universal health care or that whole approach? Now, that went on for decades prior to him getting in office and actually being able to sort of kind of start the venture toward having coverage for everyone? Are they going to talk about, getting bin Laden after a decade of him being in this exile where no one could find out where he was? Are they going to talk about same-sex marriage becoming legal under his administration? Okay, Broad Vulture says educating people on net neutrality wouldn't be a waste of time. It's good information that tells the history of the internet, similar to women's suffrage and any other movement, whether it failed or not. Yeah, but the problem I'm having, Broad Vulture, and I don't disagree with it. I don't think people knowing something or being taught something is a waste of time if they want to know it. The problem is when you don't want to know something, the more likely it is to go out of your, I guess, for lack of a better term, memory banks. So, for example, even if people know about, and again, this is the name recognition thing. Even if people know about women's suffrage, do they know when women got the first opportunity to vote? Do they know about the amendment in 1920? It goes along with the idea of we at root know what something is or who someone was, but we don't know much about them or enough beyond the surface. And that's really what's problematic with most of these situations. Because even if you tell people, net neutrality and how it almost got repealed in 2017, who's going to remember Agent Pie? And if they do remember his name, what can they tell you about him? How he talked about for years wanting to get rid of this, and no one took him seriously until he was able to get the power as the FCC chairman after getting appointed by Trump? Who's going to mention that? That's why it feels like it's frustrating to sit here and hope that you're actually contributing to keeping this a topic of discussion and frequently being brought up here and there, and then forward thinking to when you can't do it anymore in 60 or 70 years and people just walk around not knowing what it is. So it's more so the long-term purpose of understanding this. And Simply Deep is getting greeted by Reluctant Dragon. They'll go out on a couple of double dates if they're both males, that is, with some females, I'm sure. Which I've actually seen that in chat rooms. People try to pick up each other, get the play going, and it's kind of I have a mixed feeling toward it, where it's nice people form those types of relationships in places that maybe aren't ideal, but the problem is that when they're doing that, there's a high frequency they're not paying attention to what's actually being discussed or otherwise being talked about by the person who's hosting the stream, for example. So if someone says hello, there's no problem with that, but if you have an ongoing, enormous discussion, that's where it's even worse. Okay, Broad Vulture says, yeah, I live in a small city where most people aren't that internet savvy. Talking about net neutrality wouldn't be a well cared for topic here compared to Trump on stuff like that. I don't, here's my stance on that. I don't know how many computers they have in that small city, but I'm willing to bet they have several. And I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people who live there that frequent the internet. Whether or not they're around, 30 people that also do it or 300 people that also do it, they're going to be impacted. That's why when you don't, this numbers game doesn't work for me all that well. That's part of what kind of motivates me to keep trying to speak about this daily. Well, it could be, the what do you call it, the farmland. I'm sure someone has a phone that can go on the internet somewhere. Are you telling me no? It's just, how do they have emails or what? They just have carrier pigeons and regular pieces of paper. So you'll have to explain more to me about this area's way of life. I don't think they're still using typewriters and Morse code. I'm sure they have text messaging on their mobile phones. And now I just lost my point. So we have a new blooper to add to the reel. Me trying to make an argument and then someone still, yeah, just okay. Brawl Vulture says, yeah, just farm heavy area, but yeah, they use phones and stuff like that. Again, the point of what I'm making is that regardless of where you live within the U.S., if you have any type of access to the internet on a frequent basis, you are going to be impacted by this. And it seems a lot of the people who are going to be bothered and impacted by this aren't trying to learn anything about this. I've spoken to some people multiple times since I started making this stuff, and all they've been able to do is say, oh, you've been making a lot about net neutrality. You've been talking a lot about net neutrality. You've been talking a lot about net neutrality. Works from home on phones, so those foreign claims the company should work, pay for internet. Okay, Bravo says most here just use it for communication. Those wouldn't be something they care for since they don't live on the internet. Okay, but here's my my argument toward that, Broad Vulture. If you have a car that you only drive, I don't know, to go to the market every 7 days, and you say, okay, well, gas doesn't really matter to me because I don't drive this car every day. Then one day you walk outside and you find out someone smashed that car up so much you can't even start the vehicle anymore. You're going to be impacted by that. You know, the frequency shouldn't matter if you use it at all with any recurring basis, whether it's once a year or 10 times a year or 100 times a year. It shouldn't be to where you just don't care about what happens to it. You're still using it. I'm having a hard time understanding why videos of this nature are not being actively sought out by people who don't know what this is. You know, even if you thought I was unreliable, why don't you go to TYT or somewhere else that, you know, puts up the little different versions of text on front of the screen. The only reason I don't do that is because I don't want to get claimed for copyright. You know, they'll go after you for everything now. Someone could drive past my home with the, you know, some music from whichever rapper or singer is currently popular right now, and they would strike me down for that. And I wasn't even the one who turned it on. And you know I'm not because you see me in front the entire time. So that goes along with what I'm trying to convey here. Reluctant Dragon says because they don't care and then stick their hands in. No, 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 no. There's a video from earlier this year where there's a guy that was opposed to someone speaking about Obama, and in response to this, the other person, the actual uploader of the video, said cover your ears. And that's kind of where I got that idea from, where people either, if they don't want to hear something or they just don't care to go and learn something, it's the equivalent of sticking your hands in your ears and going, no, 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 no. I had a female I was speaking to earlier this year that said her favorite president was Obama. And I started trying to tell her, you know, I'm not a fan because of X, Y, and Z. She goes, oh, I just like his relationship with, I guess, his family and how he talks, or he's funny. You know, things that aren't really what someone, I would think. I would think if you like a president more than other presidents because of their actual policies. She told me in almost cursing language, I don't care about his policies. I don't care about his politics. Stop telling me I don't care. You're not going to change my mind. Just stop. Stop telling me I don't care. You're not going to change my mind. Just stop. I sat there and I said, are you kidding me? No one goes out of their way to not know something. At least from what I've actually seen within the context of my own life. I have never known a man or female that I've spoken to in person and sat there and said, hey, here's, you know, A, B, and C of why I like, I don't know, LBJ or Truman the most out of all the presidents because of this, that, and the other. It's a very shortened, literally sentences that just break down what they did. And they'll sit there and listen. And it's like this thing now where people just, when they have a computer, it's like they think that if they spend, I don't know, 5 minutes learning something that's not their typical routine, as she said, of watching random funny YouTube videos for hours on end, it just breaks that cycle. And it's so aggravating to sit here and constantly have people that will defend this type of behavior and tell me this is someone that is desirable and that I need to appeal to, and have someone come on my channel talking about, oh, you know, this person you don't understand her. This is why you can't do it. And it's not about having someone change who they are for me. It's the fact that you're going to tell me something that I feel is not informed. I feel if you only like a president because of what their jokes and something else, that's not informed. Even the people I don't agree with that are conservative and tell you that Reagan was the best, or the people who are just obsessed with image and tell you Kennedy was the best, they still can tell you about their policies or what they did in office. Or at least something about them that isn't just, he made a joke. What? So, yeah, that person's an example of what is bothersome to me. And the fact is, that type of behavior is glorified in this type of internet age. Let me respond to Reluctant Dragon. Yeah, PewDiePie, Vine videos, that kind of material she's into. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with being into that kind of stuff. It's the same argument for anything. If you're into sports and you turn on the news to go learn about what just happened down the street, you're staying informed while being into whatever you're into. They can't do this thing where they just have variety being a spice of life. You get interested in these funny whatever, and then you go back to the serious thing. No, Reluctant Dragon, I want you to really think about this, and I want the other 3 people in here to think about this. That type of behavior where you just shut your ears off to wanting to learn something that is not in favor with what you were saying. Okay, let me respond to Brought Vulture. He's saying something. Okay, the car analogy is kind of confusing. People can't visualize the state of the internet that easily compare it to a wrecked car. Only if you're an online content creator will you see the damage. Okay, well, let me have another analogy. I don't know how that's not good. If it's the same thing if you don't use this all the time or every day, but you're still in whatever. That's my logic seeping through. I don't know. What's something else? If you have a television, maybe, for example, and you watch TV every 10 days, going along with that thing you said earlier about they don't use the internet every day, and you turn on the TV the first time in 10 days and the screen seems all right, everything looks nice, then every 2 minutes after actual content, there's a couple of advertisements. So think about this. They want their hour-long shows to now be 2-hour-long shows. They're not going to film more content. They're going to make it to where every 2 minutes of the actual show, there's about 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 minutes of ads. So you can't see the damage, but you can... It's something in that same vein where it's not... You notice it after a while, or you notice it when you start watching or experiencing it after they've implemented that position. Okay, Broad Vulture says most people use it for communication versus creation. It's probably why most people don't care or just don't see how it affects them. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. The problem I have is that people are actively trying to not know about this, and if you try to tell them, they just go back to their own vices or, react in the kind of whatever type of tone, and don't really seem all that bothered by the idea that this is effectively removing freedom of speech from the internet. This is giving companies like Comcast, AT&T, the ability to go and say, if this is against what we want, we're just going to pull it, or rather we're going to mess it up to where there's going to be a series of loading screens, or it's super slow, or there's ads all over the place of us. That's where my problem is. Let me respond to Fucking Dragon. So if people pay that for unlimited, if people pay that $60 for unlimited data, they're screwed too. I don't know if you're making a statement or if you're, I don't know what that was referring. But if you're saying that they're screwed, yeah, if they're paying more for something that they didn't have to pay for before, yeah, they're getting screwed. You gotta remember, the more you pay for your okay, here's what I'm trying to say, Reluctant Dragon, because I guess maybe you're not getting it. If you're forced to pay more for things that you were already able to just get for free, like going on some website, you're not getting more money to make up for the more you have to spend on these sites. For example, if you're working a job to where you're getting paid enough to go and be able to live the life you currently live, You think your employer is now going to fork over 60 more bucks? So I'm saying they're pricing you more for things you already enjoy for less or just for free. All right, so you're claiming I answered your question, so that's my stance on that. I'll have something else up tomorrow on the same topic, and I'll try to have another thing. You know, there's so many little different ways in which this story is seeping through to other narratives and ideas, and I think this was wide ranging enough to be major and seen as important. So thank you for watching. Have a good day.